Today's video is going to be around another pen that is fairly common, actually very common, and yet also I believe is underappreciated for its many fine qualities. This shape, you will notice if you've looked through my pen shape glossary, is what I call an inflexible shape. And I call it inflexible because of the very pen that is at the top here. That is an Esterbrook 322 inflexible. This shape was made by definitely all American pen companies. Many British, I believe, also made a shape like this. And they came in fairly standard ones, and then a couple of variations, which we will look at the bottom. The pens themselves are often very similar in their characteristics, except when you get into some of the variations. And they were made in basically the same shape, which is distinctive, and for the same purposes. The Esterbrook, in their early book on Esterbrook pens and what they can do, they talk about it as it's splendid for figures and bookkeeping. And we'll see it is a very fine, very firm, hence the word inflexible, I would imagine, pen that holds a great deal of ink. All right, let's see what we can do. Clear the board and put the first pen in. The first one is the Esterbrook, as I said, the 322. This was the pen that kind of gives the name to all of it. As you'll notice, it is a very fine line, not a lot of variation. To give you an idea of just how fine of a line that is, we'll draw a few lines. I'll compare it with a fountain pen that is often considered a very fine line, extremely fine. This is a platinum desk pen with the carbon black ink, and so you might recognize this pen. It's a wonderful little pen to have on hand, but this is an extra fine fountain pen. And the Esterbrook's, depending on how much pressure you put on it, that's a downward stroke. So that would be basically a flex stroke on this. You could get even finer lines going up. You can get a little flex, but there's not a whole lot. All right, let's go to the next one. Now the next one is an interesting one. This is an RE Kindle is what it has on it, and I have the box. This is the box. RE Kindle Pen Company, Cincinnati, Ohio. It says silver alloy pens, number 226. Now it just so happens I have another RE Kindle box I recently purchased. It's a number 117 silver alloy. Now what's interesting is that this 117, the pens in there look exactly the same as the RE Kindle 226s, but for some reason, Turner and Harrison, who actually made the pens, sent them actual Turner and Harrison pens. They were not imprinted with the RE Kindle Pen Company name. These, the inflexible ones that we have, the RE Kindle number 226, is imprinted with, it says RE Kindle Pen Company. The other ones, though, because they say Turner and Harrison, they gives us the clue. We now know this is actually a Turner and Harrison pen. It's one of their silver alloy pens. The problem I have with these silver alloy and silver this and silver that is oftentimes you will not get quite as much ink sticking to the pens. It's a slipperier surface. It may help keep away rust, but it doesn't hold quite as much ink. So let's give a little room here, and I'll explain why in a bit. RE. This is the Kindle. So this is their 226. It's a different writing experience than some of the others that we've looked at because it is so firm. It is in some ways less forgiving. Oops, if I can spell. Because it is so, you can't hide anything in thick swells. It's all right there. But that's the RE Kindle pen company. You can see it writes fairly similar to the Esterbrook Inflexible. It's a well-made pen. Turner and Harrison did not make junk pens, but that is a nice pen. The next one is the J.L. Isaacs. Now, J.L. Isaacs is an interesting company. Judah L. Isaacs was the son of Leon Isaacs, who had a very successful pen company in Philadelphia. J.L. Isaacs died in 1889, I'm trying to remember the exact date. Anyway, J.L. Isaacs died. His sons, it's in 1896. They took over for a while. They ended up selling the company to Turner and Harrison, and Turner and Harrison continued to make Leon Isaacs pens. They're Glucinum pens, the slickest pen made, all the way until they closed their doors in 1952. Judah L. Isaacs, one of the top salespeople for Leon, had by that point left. He had gone to New York City, where he had been stationed for his sales, and he started his own company. Now, the J.L. Isaacs pens you find mostly were actually made in England. Now there's a line he had called the Never Rust, which again is a kind of it's a form of stainless steel, so these don't rust so well, which is great, but then they don't hold quite as much ink. Yeah, and they a fair amount, though. You can see these Inflexibles can hold quite a bit of ink. But the Never Rust, what's interesting is most of them still say made in England. This one does not. I believe there was probably a time, this is speculation on my part, maybe during World War I, when they could not get English pens, and so he had them made in the United States. The point is that J.L. Isaacs never actually made his own pens. He had other people make them, imprint his name, and then he just sold them. But you can see it's a nice pen. Even this later one is a nice pen. It's smooth. For something so fine, they are actually quite smooth, oftentimes. So this is J.L. Isaacs. Next one is the Fiddler and Chambers. Now, I've not been able to figure out if Fiddler and Chambers actually made their own pens. I highly doubt it. I believe these were probably made by somebody else. Now, what's interesting is you'll notice this pen has a bit more flex to it. Just a little bit. Now, I've not been able to get this is a D. I've not been able to get an Eagle Inflexible. I don't have one of those yet. I know they made one, and it would be interesting to compare that one to this to see, because this one has a little bit more flex, as you can see. than the Esterbrook or the Turner and Harrison or the J.L. Isaacs. There you go. So the next one we're going to look at, those are kind of those are four just standard inflexibles I pulled out of my collection. Next one I'm going to look at, I'm going to come back up here for a second because this is another Esterbrook. But this Esterbrook is different. This is the 531 Flyer. And looks a lot like the original Esterbrook 322, but, and I'm not sure if it can be seen, it has a turned up tip. So the tip on this turns up. What that does is that allows it to be a little bit smoother writer than a pointed tip. What it also does, though, is it makes it a wider line. So this is actually more like a medium. And it has some flexibility to it. This is an interesting pen because it gives you kind of the benefit of this larger ink capacity. Yet it's also fairly smooth, and it has some flex to it. So I actually kind of like the Flyer when I don't really need to have super fine lines. I have seen this mentioned as a school pen, as a possible school pen, but I think it was more used for business correspondence and such, where you didn't really need necessarily the fine lines for writing in your ledger, etc. All right, so that's the Esterbrook 531 Flyer. Last one we're going to look at is this little guy. There are several companies that made what I call small inflexibles. It's the shape. I mean, there's really no other way to put it, because if you compare it, it is basically the inflexible shape, just smaller. So it has kind of the boxier end to the spoon. It has that really deep neck. It's smooth. So this is the Berrien Pen Company, number 50, small. These were basically the same thing. Now, look at this. Look how much ink that holds. That filled up basically the whole thing. You can write a long time with this because this, like a lot of the others, is a fairly fine, flexible, inflexible pen. It does have some flex to it. It's closer to the Fiddler and Chambers, but it is small. The size of a pen does make a difference in the experience. I haven't quite been able to tie down exactly what is that difference, how to describe it. But writing with a small, see the flex drinks up a lot of that ink. A small pen will definitely have a difference. Sometimes better, sometimes not as good. I do like the small pen, the small inflexibles, but I kind of prefer the larger inflexibles more. So there you go. Those are your inflexibles, from the small one all the way up. There's the Flyer. There's your Isaacs. Kindle and your Esterbrook. So they're inflexible pens. They're nice pens. They're good pens for writing checks, for writing in your journal, when you need to, especially if you have a small journal and you need to write small. They're great pens. They're inexpensive. They're everywhere. And try them out and see what you think.